Perhaps the most influential, and certainly the largest nation to have ever existed, the British Empire has earned its place in the history books. Spanning over 400 years, the British Empire's presence was felt globally for numerous generations until the handover of Hong Kong back to China in July 1997, which marked the end of the empire in the eyes of many. However, unbeknownst to many, the UK still has colonies today, now called overseas territories, 14 to be precise. We'll take a look at some of the last remaining vestiges of the British Empire in this 3-part series. We begin our journey on the southern coast of the Iberian Peninsula with the territory of Gibraltar, home to around 35,000 people. First coming under British control following the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, Gibraltar is one of the UK's oldest overseas possessions and was colonised long before the days of British rule in India and Africa. Gibraltar's location at the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean has made it of great strategic importance to the Royal Navy, who have always maintained a constant presence there. This was also a prime reason why Spain made so many attempts to get it back, notably in a siege in 1727, another siege from 1779 to 1783, and an attempt to cut off its only land border in the 1950s by Spanish dictator Francisco Franco. However, the territory's inhabitants have always voted to remain under British rule, as shown in referendums in 1967 and 2002. Fortunately, with the days of war in Western Europe long over and political stability being the norm, Gibraltar has been allowed to flourish in all respects and now boasts one of the highest GDPs per capita anywhere in the world, and has become a well-established tourist destination thanks to attractions like the Gibraltar Rock, its wild monkey population, St. Michael's Cove, and numerous historical relics. We now move from the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea to its easternmost reaches onto the island of Cyprus, where we find the British sovereign base areas of Akrotiri and Dhekelia, and its population of around 18,000. While the entire island of Cyprus itself was a British Crown colony until 1960, the UK has maintained a military presence in these two sectors of the island, thanks to the London and Zurich agreements made shortly before the island's independence, owing largely to its militarily important location near the Middle East, in the eastern Mediterranean, and its proximity to the Suez Canal. Despite the existence of British sovereignty, the British government's actions in these territories are limited, and some of the most notable examples of this are that they are not allowed to develop the base areas for any other reason than for military purposes, not to permit the permanent settlement of people in the base areas, or to allow any commercial activity that does not have an affiliation with upholding the British military presence there. Despite this, tourists can still technically visit the territories, as frontier barriers and custom posts are also not permitted by the agreement. Nevertheless, military premises will be clearly marked and should not be entered without explicit permission. Moving down the Suez Canal and into the vast Indian Ocean, we find the British Indian Ocean Territory, a territory scattered across the Chagos Archipelago, and its population of 3,000 non-permanent military personnel. The only significant human presence here are military installments primarily used by the USA on the main island of Diego Garcia, again because of its important location at the heart of the Indian Ocean and its relative geographic isolation from many major countries. Initially part of the French colony of Mauritius, this territory, along with the rest of the Mauritius colony, was ceded to the British in the Treaty of Paris in 1814 at the conclusion of the Napoleonic Wars. In 1965, the UK split the Chagos Archipelago from Mauritius and operated it as a separate colony under the name of the British Indian Ocean Territory, just 3 years prior to Mauritian independence in 1968. In order to make it suitable for military use, the inhabitants, known as the Chagosians, were forcibly expelled from the islands in 1971 by British authorities. This remains a source of contention and a source of resentment for Chagosians to this day, who, like everyone else, are forbidden from entering the territory without explicit permission from the local authorities first. While the UK maintains sovereignty over the islands, there has been international pressure on them to give possession of the territory to Mauritius, notably in a UN ruling in 2019. Moving across Asia and into the southern Pacific Ocean, you'd be forgiven for missing these small islands on a map and certainly on any excursion into this remote reach of the planet. Consisting of the islands of Pitcairn, Henderson, Ducie and Owino, the Pitcairn Islands are uninhabited save for the settlement of Adamstown on the main island of Pitcairn. First being settled by the mutineers of the HMS Bounty and native Tahitians on board in 1790, the islands became a British colony in 1838, and all of its 47 inhabitants today are descendants of the original people on board the Bounty. Unfortunately, the future of this territory is in serious doubt, with an aging population and its young people often choosing to remain abroad after leaving Pitcairn to complete high school. It's projected that only 3 working-age people will remain on the island by 2045 at the current rate. Attempts to attract immigration have been unsuccessful, with not even a single formal application being submitted to date. Nevertheless, the territory's natural beauty is second to none, boasting one of the largest and most pristine marine protected areas in the world. Heading towards the South Pole, we find the British Antarctic Territory, along with its non-permanent population of around 200 research staff. Despite a British presence dating back to 1908 and being by far the largest British overseas territory, it is largely barren, with the only human settlements being the 2 research stations of Halley and Rothera. Like all countries with Antarctic territorial claims, British activity is strictly limited to research-related endeavours, as stipulated in the 1959 Antarctic Treaty System. Thanks to the lack of a permanent human presence, the wildlife remains relatively untouched, with penguins and seals maintaining a prominent presence here. We conclude part 1 of this series about 1,500 kilometers northeast in the territory of South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, another research-based territory of the UK. Originally administered as part of the Falkland Islands colony in the late 1700s, the territory was classified as a separate territory from 1985 onwards. Inhospitable terrain and weather means that this territory's human presence is scant, with only a few research bases scattered across the coasts, and about 30 to 50 researchers manning them in the summer months. Nevertheless, this territory saw fighting in the Falklands War and was temporarily occupied by Argentine forces before being recaptured by British forces soon after. Like the British Antarctic Territory, the minimal human presence means that its rich wildlife has remained virtually untouched and continues to flourish. With that, we conclude part 1 of this video. We'll see you soon for part 2, where we'll continue to look at what's left of the British Empire.